My name is Danica, and today I wanted to talk about my top 15 favorite bi and lesbian young adult books. I was always surprised to see that one of my most popular videos is my favorite lesbian young adult books video that I made back in 2013. And recently I rewatched it and just cringed because there's so many books in there that I would not consider young adult books anymore. And thankfully, in the 6 years since I made that video, queer YA has exploded and there is so much more than there used to be. But I took a look and realized that when you search on YouTube lesbian young adult, there really aren't a lot of videos that come up, so that's why that video, which is not particularly good, rose to the top. So I thought I would make an update. If you want to see even more, I will link the Lesberry recommendations page. And I do have more. There's just so many great queer YA books out right now that these are just my very top ones. And of course, these are just the ones that I've read. So check out the Lesberry for more, but also things like LGBTQ Reads is amazing, and also YA Pride, which I think is also a website and a Tumblr. They're both great sources for finding more. So I'll go right into my list. I am roughly counting down to my favorite, but I highly recommend all of these. I love them all, so the order is a little bit arbitrary. I'm going to start off with Labyrinths Lost by Soraya Cordova. Daniel Jose Older described this as a mix between Alice in Wonderland and Dante's Inferno, which I think is a perfect description. This has a magic system that is inspired by several different Latin American and Afro-Cuban cultures and belief systems. Although it starts in our world, the majority of the book takes place in Lagos, which is an in-between world of gods and monsters, and that's where it gets that Alice in Wonderland and Dante's Inferno comparison. The main character, her magical power, which is something that her whole family has, it's tied to her dead ancestors, and she really associates her power with death and destruction, and she's really trying to push away from it. So a lot of this story is about her journey to acceptance of herself. The main character is bisexual, and there is an MFF love triangle, and that's really my only complaint about this story is the broody guy who is one of the love interests, who I just could not get on board with. But the other love interest is her best friend, who is very bubbly, very sweet, and I really liked them together. And it's also an interracial romance between two women of color, which you still don't see a lot of in books yet. Next up is Little and Lion by Brandy Colbert. This is a quiet, thoughtful book that tackles things like race, sexuality, mental health, and adolescence. Suzette is Black, bisexual, and Jewish, and it really explores how those intersecting identities affect her life and the microaggressions that come up because of those. The blurb kind of suggests that this is a bit of a drama with her and her brother falling for the same girl, but the core relationship in this book is between her and her brother Lionel. Lionel was recently diagnosed as bipolar, and at that same time she was sent away to boarding school. So Suzette and Lionel haven't seen a lot of each other since then, and they aren't sure how to get back to the closeness that they once had. It's painful, and it only gets more complicated when they both fall for the same girl, but there is no conflict between what is more important for Suzette, and that is the relationship that she has with her brother. I can't comment on the representation of mental health here because I don't know enough about bipolar disorder to say so definitively, but I thought this was a really beautiful book that dealt with a lot of different subjects very well. And then I have Starting From Here by Lisa Jen Bigelow. I'm just going to read the first line. The last time I kissed Rachel Greenstein, we lay in the bed of Scarlett, my Ford pickup, watching the sun sink beyond West Lake. So unsurprisingly, based on that first line, this book has a lot to do with loneliness. Colby's mother died 2 years ago, and her father is a long-distance trucker, which means he is away 6 days out of the week. Colby finds a stray dog at the beginning of the novel, and she really pours her love and need for connection into this dog, and I am a sucker for a dog story. I read this in a day. I was totally hooked on this roller coaster of a story, and I was cheering Colby on and chastising her in turn. She makes a lot of mistakes, but you can feel her pain coming off the page, so I couldn't help but feel for her. And she accepts the consequences of her actions and of the mistakes that she makes. This does have some angst to it. I was definitely in tears multiple times, but it was a good kind, a cathartic kind. So I definitely think it's worth it, especially especially if you're a dog person. And if you're worried about picking up a book with a dog in it, head over to the Lesbian my review, and there's a spoiler section where I will let you know what happens to the dog. Then there's Going Off Script by Jen Wilde. I made a whole other video about Jen Wilde and her books and why I think they're amazing, but the short version is this is about a teenager who gets a job as an intern on her favorite show, but then when she writes a script to try to impress the showrunner, he passes it off as his own and then also straight washes the character that she wrote. So this is a kind of fluffy revenge story. It has a lot to do with a celebration of fandom, which is also true of another one of Jen Wilde's books that I will talk about. And it's also about that connection, that community that forms in queer fandoms and just the kind of found family that she builds. And there's really cute FF romance. Then there's Once and Future by Amy Rose Capetta and Corey McCarthy. This is a retelling of the Arthur myths, and Ari is the latest Arthur reincarnation and also the first female reincarnation. It's kind of a blend of sci-fi, fantasy, and dystopia. It's also super queer. Merlin is gay, Ari is queer, so is Guinevere, and some of the knight characters like Val. There is a non-binary character who uses they them pronouns. There's an asexual character. This is about resistance against a corporation that rules the galaxy. I won't try to summarize the plot because there's a lot going on, but you can check out my review for more. But this is epic and feminist and queer. It's all about resistance and survival. It's about making connections and being vulnerable and how that is a kind of bravery. There's a definite found family element in this one as well. And it's also fast-paced and captivating and funny, but super emotional despite that. And it has really moving both FF and MM romances. Then there's Girls Made of Snow and Glass by Melissa Bashadu. This is a fairy tale about misogyny. Although there is an FF romance, the core relationship here is between Mina and Lynette. Lynette is her stepmother and she fits the evil queen and evil stepmother tropes of fairy tales. We alternate between Mina's story and Lynette's backstory, where you start to see how she was groomed into being this character, how she was valued only for her appearances, and how she was pitted against other women her whole life. And part of the reason I love this book was this exploration of that trope of what would make someone become this kind of person. And the complex relationship between the two of them is so compelling. Mina really sees Lynette as a mother figure, really the only mother that she knew because her mother died so young. And Lynette sees Mina in this complex way because she does have some maternal feelings for her, but she also sees her as a competitor for all of the power that she has for everything that she has worked so hard to get. And even Mina's love interest is pitted against her in this society, and we see how restrained these women are. But despite the hurt that they inflict on each other, and despite the skepticism and the pessimism, they still find ways to reach out to each other and to make these connections. And it's these relationships and the love that develops between these women that really opens up new possibilities for them. So if you want a really feminist fairy tale retelling, I would definitely recommend this one. Then there's Silhouette of a Sparrow by Molly Beth Griffin. This takes place in the 1920s in America, and Garnet is really trying to navigate between the basically Victorian values of her family and the rapidly changing flapper culture of the 1920s. The title comes because she cuts out silhouettes of the birds that she loves, and that's really the only feminine, acceptable way for her to express her interest in ornithology. The love story is sweet, but it's really more of a subplot. She falls for this beautiful, mysterious flapper girl who asks a lot of questions about her assumptions in her life, but she is also obligated to her mother and to provide for her mother, and really the only option for them is for her to get married. And that's the central tension of the book, is her trying to find the edges of herself and decide what is an acceptable sacrifice and how much she owes to herself and to the people that she loves and cares for. Then there's Girl Made of Stars by Ashley Herring Blake. This is a really rough premise that is impeccably handled. So definite trigger warnings for discussion of rape in this description, and also for description of rape, PTSD, and panic attacks, as well as rape culture in the novel. So this is about Mara. She is very close to her twin brother Owen until he is accused of rape by Mara's best friend. Mara never doubts Hannah, but she she also has trouble coming to terms with the idea that this is something that her brother would do and that he would lie about it. It has this rape culture element because people really team up on who they believe and who they throw their support behind, and it brings up Mara's own buried trauma about this topic. Another element to this book is Charlie, who is Mara's ex and her old best friend and also her current love interest. Charlie is genderqueer, and a subplot of this is Charlie discovering her own gender identity. This is definitely not an easy read, emotionally speaking. It makes it especially difficult because Owen is not just this abstract villain. He is someone that Mara knows very well and loves. He is someone that she has to continue to live with and will likely always be in her life, and just how she has to find a way to reconcile that. Then there's This Is What It Feels Like by Rebecca Barrow. It follows 3 teenage girls who just graduated from high school. A few years ago, they were inseparable and they were in a band together. Then Hannah's alcoholism landed her in the hospital with alcohol poisoning, and almost at the same time, Dia's new boyfriend was killed in a car accident, and she finds out soon after that she is pregnant, and she decides to keep the baby. Hannah and Dia walk away from each other, and Jules sides with Dia. And this takes place when the city is having a contest, a battle of bands, and it includes a $15,000 prize that they could possibly win, but it would mean getting the band back together. And who can resist a getting the band back together book? This really deals with the complex relationships between these 3 characters. The conflicts that they have with each other are nuanced and they're understandable, and they also just talk to each other about them. There's a lot to work through, so it doesn't get solved right away, but it isn't that you're spending the whole book thinking, just tell them how you feel. This also has a great FF romance and also a great MF romance. Jules meets her new coworker Autumn and immediately has an all-consuming crush on her. If you hate insta-love, you might not enjoy this, but I think if you stick with it, you'll come around, because they really do have to work through their relationship. This is Autumn's first relationship with another woman, and they also bring some baggage to this, and they have to really communicate. I also appreciated this depiction of a teenage mom who is also living her own life. She is going to school, she is finding a way to balance things. My mom and my sister were also teenage moms, and when my sister was pregnant and had her first kid, we were all living together and we all helped out, and it was kind of like Dia's family in that way. And I just appreciated seeing a teenage mom character who is still pursuing her dreams and still being herself. But mostly I feel like the strength of this book is just how nuanced and complex all the relationships are. You can probably see a pattern here of the kind of books that I really enjoy, and it's ones that have really well-rounded characters who have complex, layered relationships with each other, and this definitely has that. Next is Of Fire and Stars by Audrey Coulthurst. This is a YA fantasy book where 2 princesses fall in love, and there's more to it than that. There's court politics and betrayal and suppressed magic, but really, what do you need more than that premise? This is a perfect read-alike for Tamora Pierce fans, complete with loving attention lavished on the horse characters. We get to see that grudging friendship grows into something more trope, which I always enjoy. And these 2 characters, one of them is kind of a tomboy, reluctant princess, and the other one has been really trained her whole life to be the ideal queen. For all the people who watch Frozen and wished Elsa would get a girlfriend, I think you should pick this one up. Suppressed magic is a part of the plot of Fire and Stars. Denalea lives in a kingdom that finds magic to be blasphemous, so she's trying to suppress her own magic, but when her emotions get out of hand, things go up in smoke. Basically, this is everything I wanted from Disney princesses, but with added depth and maturity. Then there's Adaptation and Inheritance by Melinda Lowe, and I'm cheating a little bit and counting this duology as one, though I also recommend the ebook-only short story that relates to this duology. This is an X-Files inspired sci-fi story, but it has the kind of pacing and high-stakes drama that I associate with dystopia. It begins with birds falling out of the sky and reports that planes have crashed because of mass bird strikes. Then the coverage of the plane crashes starts disappearing from the news, and conspiracy theorists are talking about cover-ups. Then panic starts to spread, chaos erupts, there's looting, and that's just in the first chapter. And from there, the pace does not slow down. There is an MFF love triangle in here, but it is handled brilliantly. As a duology, Adaptation spends the whole time going at a pretty fast fast-paced and raising a lot of questions. Inheritance is not as fast-paced, but it really explores all the things that adaptation brought up. There's also explorations of gender and sexuality and race. If you're in social justice circles, it's probably nothing new, but in terms of mainstream media, it's above and beyond. If I had read this as a teenager, it would have blown my mind. So obviously I highly recommend this, and kind of especially if you're not usually a fan of love triangles. Next is Queens of Geek by Jen Wilde. Again, I made another video about that, so you should check it out for my discussion of all of Jen Wilde's books. But this one is a dual perspective. There's Charlie, who is a bisexual Chinese-Australian actress, and Taylor, who is straight. She is fat, geeky, and has Asperger's. This is all set at a convention, and they're there with their best friend Jamie, who is also Taylor's love interest. They're there partly just for fun and partly to help promote Charlie's new movie. Unfortunately, Charlie's movie stars her and her ex-boyfriend, so it requires being around him a lot. I love the setting of the convention and the celebration of fandom. Although I picked this up because of the FF romance, I ended up actually really liking Taylor and Jamie's romance as well. But for the FF romance, Charlie finds a fellow vlogger, and it turns out they are both fans of each other. Their flirtation is adorable, and this is another one that has an interracial romance between two women of color. This is super fluffy, fun, and absorbing. I think I read it all in one day, and it's just so comforting and sweet, and it made me a lifelong Jen Wilde fan. Next up is All Out, the no longer secret stories of queer teens through the ages, edited by Sandra Mitchell. And what I love about this is that it is all historical fiction short stories that are YA, and they all have happy endings. One of the challenges of finding your queer community is not only finding people, but also rediscovering your history, because there is this idea that queer people don't have history, and it's been taken from us, and it's been buried a lot of the time. I think this is a much needed book because it locates queer people throughout history, and it raises this idea that not only have we existed throughout time, but that we can have happy endings throughout time as well. There are trans, gay, lesbian, and asexual characters in this from about the 1200s till the 1990s. There are different cultures represented, but my only complaint is that I wish there were more in different time periods as well as places outside of North America and Europe. My second favorite sapphic YA book is How to Make a Wish by Ashley Herring Blake. This is the second book by Blake to be on this list. This book deals with grief and unhealthy family dynamics and abuse. Grace's father died when she was young, and since then she's really had to be a parental figure to her mother. Maggie has been dragging Grace from one boyfriend's house to another, and Grace has often had to pull Maggie out of bars and keep her safe. This leads to her suppressing a lot of her pain and anger, and that can come out with lashing out at people, especially people that she cares about. So she is flawed, but she is so relatable, and you can tell where she's coming from, and this is her story of growth as well. Grace's love interest is Eva, who has recently lost her own mom, and Maggie, who can relate to this grief, reached out to Eva, and they have formed a relationship, and Grace has this complex feeling about that because she is both jealous of the kind of parental role that Maggie is now playing for Eva, but she is also scared for Eva because she knows how unreliable and sometimes dangerous Maggie can be. So this is so complex, and again you have these really well-rounded characters who have these intersecting relationships with each other that all layer together. Again, that's something that I really respond to, and it's done so incredibly well in this story. It is absolutely beautiful. And finally, my number one pick for my first video is still my number one pick now, and that's The Miseducation of Cameron Post by Emily M. Danforth. This is what the author calls a coming-of-age story. Cameron struggles to come to terms with her parents' death while she is being raised in this very small conservative town by her religious aunt. The strength of this book lies in Cam, who is such a believable and well-rounded character. She is a film buff who has a dollhouse that she decorates with these small stolen things like gum wrappers and wallpapering it with used stamps, and she goes exploring abandoned buildings with her friends. The conversion camp is a major part of the story, but it's not the whole story. But do be prepared for that. It is incredibly emotional and difficult, and it has some disturbing scenes that really show how much this culture of shame really harms these kids, these teenagers. Her writing writing is incredible, and it just made me fall in love with the characters. Despite this being over 500 pages, I was disappointed to reach the last page. I just wanted it to keep going. I also really appreciate the title because it made me think about how queer people are miseducated, that we learn about a world usually that doesn't include us, and we usually grow up with misconceptions of queer people, and we have to relearn and unlearn those things later on. Sadly, the author has not put out any more books since then, and I so desperately want more, but I am very happy to have this one. It is my favorite lesbian YA. So those are my top 15 bi and lesbian young adult picks. I could really keep going. There's Dreadnought, which is a really great trans lesbian superhero YA book that deals a lot with trauma. Annie on My Mind is a classic, even though it's not my personal favorite. And of course, the all ages and YA comics could be a whole other video. There's lots of links in the description if you want more. Thank you to my Patreon supporters for making videos like this possible. If you want to support the Lesberry and this channel on Patreon, any $2 and up supporters get entered in a monthly draw for a queer woman book, and you also get behind the scenes looks at the Lesberry and this channel and all the other things I do online. Let me know if you've read any of these and what you've thought of them, or which book that you think I should have included on this list. What are your favorites? And thank you for watching.